So, you want to blend eyeshadow like a pro, but every time you try colour, it ends up looking like, well, mud. Today I'm breaking down exactly how to set up your eyes, what brushes to use, and blending tips that will take your look from patchy to polished. And if you need proof I know what I'm talking about, here are my credentials. So let's dive into my top tips and tricks to blend eyeshadow like a pro. So first things first, let's talk brushes. Eyeshadow brushes are the key to creating a good blend. For years I used cheap brushes and it showed whenever I tried to do complicated makeup looks. So I've gathered 4 main brushes that I use a lot in my blends. The first one's being fluffy brushes. Fluffy eyeshadow brushes are really great for diffusing colour. Fluffy brushes come in various different sizes, some taper out towards the ends, some are fat and round, and some are small with really wispy light ends. Here are a few examples of fluffy brushes I like to use often when creating my looks. These are great for diffusing colour like transition shades or if you want to soften a blend. So next we have our dense or packing brushes. These brushes are fantastic for laying colour down and building the foundation to your eyeshadow look. I like to use dense brushes like this for my darkest eyeshadow tones because that's where I want the most pigment. Here are some examples of dense brushes I use very often to create depth in my eyeshadow looks. Next up we have our flat brushes. These are really good for laying down shimmer shades or packing on mattes, especially over the eyelid or in any areas where you want detail. These brushes can be very dense if you want to pick up a lot of colour, or thinner if you want to apply less. Here are some examples of flat brushes I use for various different things. These are also great for doing cut creases, especially these really thin brushes because they give you a really crisp line. And lastly, we have flat brushes that are angled or tapered. These also have various different functions such as eyeliners, creating crisp, sharp wings, inner corner, gel liner, graphic liner, you name it, these are the brushes perfectly designed for that. Here are some examples of flat brushes I use often to create my graphic looks. Now there are many different types of eyeshadow brushes. Those are the main ones that I use in my looks, and I would highly recommend that you actually go out and buy a decent brush set. I love using Morphe brushes, Sigma, Inglot, P. Louise, and even What's Up Beauty have some really great brushes. Some of these brands are a little bit more expensive. I would recommend Morphe brushes if you are wanting a more affordable option. I am still using my Morphe brushes 10 years on, so they will last you. However, if you have a bit of cash to splash, I would recommend Sigma brushes. Every time I clean them, they just retain their shape so beautifully. You would not know that some of the brushes in my collection are almost 8 years old because they just last. So now that we have talked about brushes, how do you actually use them? So there are many different blending techniques that you can use when applying your eyeshadows. The ones I use the most are packing, sweeping or window wiper motions, and circular motions. Now packing is kind of in the name, it's where you really press the colour into the eye. A packing motion really allows you to bring depth into the look and build that colour up to its full opacity. This is a great technique to use in a smoky eye or when you're laying down a dark eyeshadow. Next up we have sweeping or window wiper motions. This is when the brush is being swept back and forth to diffuse the edge of an eyeshadow. This is great when you're trying to blend dark to light colours and is perfect for softening the edge of any eyeshadow. I use this technique a lot when I'm blending my colours from dark to light. And lastly, we have our circular motions technique. This technique is perfect when you're working with the last colours in your blend. It's perfect for transition shades or when you want to work very light-handedly. I use this technique most often when I'm working with my final colour in my blend and wanting to get a perfect seamless edge. Brush pressure is also another technique that I will touch on. I see a lot of people holding their brush right at the top. You do not want to do this. If I'm holding my brush right at the top, all of my pressure is going into this tiny bit here, and that's going to result in a really harsh, heavy-handed blend. I like to start holding my brush at about halfway for my darkest colour, and as I go towards my lighter shades, I actually move my hand back. So if you want lighter pressure, you need to move your hand further back along the brush. So for harder pressure, further up, and for lighter pressure, lower down. So before I get into showing you how to apply those techniques to this eye look, I first want to talk about the different eyeshadow types. Now there are a variety of eyeshadow types. mattes, satin, shimmers, duochromes, wet formulas, crayons. There are endless possibilities when it comes to picking an eyeshadow. To keep things really simple, I'm going to break it down into mattes, satins, and shimmers. These are your typical eyeshadows that you will find in pretty much every single eyeshadow palette. Matte shades are typically used through the crease to create structure to the look, where shimmer shades are usually placed on the lid, in a corner or brow bone, anywhere that you want to add light reflection. The reflection of light adds light to the area, therefore opening it up or making it look bigger. This is why a lot of people put lighter colors in their inner corner and brow bone to lift the eye. Whereas you'll notice on me, I've got my darker shades through my crease to create structure. So satin formulas are a hybrid of the two. It's a matte with a shimmer throughout it. And the reason for this is that sometimes eyeshadows can be quite hard to blend if they're just a matte, so adding a little bit of shimmer helps to break that color up. You can use this formula in place of a shimmer or a matte. I find that they're quite useful when blending out stubborn shades because they have that bit of sparkle. They just seem to diffuse colors a lot better. Today we'll just be focusing on matte and shimmer shades to keep it nice and simple. So I have picked blue and green for this look because they are complementary colors on the color wheel. If you look at the color wheel here, you can see that there are a lot of colors that are opposite to each other. Colors opposite in the color wheel are going to be difficult to blend because they don't share similar undertones. Whereas blue and green, being right next to each other, they bridge nicely because they share similar undertones. Now you can totally do looks with contrasting colors like I've done here, but it does take a lot of practice. But I definitely would recommend giving it a go so that you can understand color theory. Start out by blending colors that are next to each other on the color wheel and branch out to some more creative stuff once you're more comfortable. Before we get into the tutorial, let's actually talk eyeshadow palettes briefly. I strongly believe that you are only as good as the products you have, and when I was buying $18 palettes off eBay, the evidence was clear. Once I started investing in products that had formulas that were designed to work, I noticed that my eyeshadow skills improved a lot. Now with the rise in affordable beauty, you absolutely do not have to spend lots on eyeshadow palettes to get a formula that works well. Some more affordable eyeshadow brands that I love are Morphe and Colourpop. I've been using them for such a long time and I feel like they are truly very beginner friendly and also very affordable. However, if you are wanting to know which eyeshadow palettes are my favorite for creating colorful looks, keep an eye out for my upcoming YouTube video where I talk about my top 5 rainbow palettes. So the two palettes I'll be using to create this look are the P. Louise Make It Rain palette and the P. Louise 1111 AM to PM palette. One thing I forgot to mention and I noticed while I was editing this is base products. Most people start out using their concealer as an eyeshadow base and there is nothing wrong with that. However, I find concealer creases a lot more and does not last as long as an actual eye base. My favorite eyeshadow base is the P. Louise Cosmetic base. This is the shade Rumor 1. I found that once I switched to an eyeshadow base that was designed for makeup longevity, my eyeshadow lasted so much longer. I also do quite enjoy the Sigma Beauty eye base. Urban Decay does one. Pretty much most brands do an eye primer. However, if you have nothing else, you can use concealer. It's better to have something on the lid than nothing. And another controversial tip is I actually don't like to set my eye base down. A lot of people will apply a translucent powder to set the eye, but I find that that really dulls the eyeshadows and the pigment does not stick, making the look go muddy. If you're struggling to get eyeshadow to stay on your lid, try not setting your base and then applying your eyeshadows. So for eye prep today, I'm going to take my P. Louise base in the shade Rumor 1. I'm going to apply that underneath my brows and on my lids. Now the trick with this is that you don't want to apply too much. If you apply too much product, it's going to go really thick and it's going to crease really easily no matter what you use. So I like to actually apply my base product and then blend it out with my foundation sponge because it just takes the excess product off and only keeps what's necessary on the eye. So as you can see, we have some nicely primed eyes. If you don't have a foundation sponge, you can tap the product in with your finger or go in with a small fluffy brush that will achieve the same result. I just personally like the sponge because it does take the excess product off and I feel like it gives a smoother finish. So now that we have primed, we are ready to place down our eyeshadows. I'm going to be going between the two P. Louise palettes that I showed you, but I will show you the shade names as I go. Now personally, when I'm blending my eyeshadows, I like to go from my darkest shade to my lightest shade. I feel like I just get a much more seamless blend, and I find if you are building up colours over already set eyeshadows, they can go patchy and muddy, which we want to avoid. Now, I do not like to set my eye bases. I find that this just makes eyeshadows stick in really weird places. It's hard to blend, and I just haven't really found a base product that lets me set my eyes unless I'm doing a really quick glam look. But with colourful looks, we really want to get the most pigment out of the colours and build the vibrancy up, and that does require being able to pack that colour on and have its full opacity stick to the eye. So for that reason, I don't like to set down my eye base. On a Sigma E42 brush, I'm going to take the shade Splash of Sass. Before we place any eyeshadow on the lid, it's really important that you understand where to hold your eyeshadow brush. I'm holding my eyeshadow brush about halfway down. If I hold it all the way at the top here, I'm going to get really harsh lines and it's going to be really difficult to blend. Holding the brush down here gives me a lot more control over my pressure. So I'm just using the very tip of the brush and using some little back and forward motions. So now I'm placing my brush down and dragging it up to the crease, and by doing this I am really placing that color down and packing it in. And to go back and diffuse the edges, I'm just doing some really light-handed sweeping motions, or window wiper motions as I like to call them, and that's just going to soften the edge. Now keep in mind, I am not putting heaps of pressure down here. I am still holding the brush midway. Now we get to this point here and you might be wondering, how do you taper the edge of an eyeshadow out? I actually like to use my finger and push down on the edge of the brush, and this just helps me flatten the edge so I can sweep the eyeshadow out. And just like that, you have a really nicely tapered out eyeshadow edge. Now I like to make sure that my color is packed on, so you can pick up some more eyeshadow and just go over that shade. Don't bring it up any higher. If you're going to add color, add it underneath, because as you blend it out, the blend will move up the eye. If you also get a lot of eyeshadow on your lid like me, don't worry about that. Because my brush is coming from a downwards angle, it's going to result in eyeshadow going on the lid. If you want to avoid that, bring your brush up so that the product is just going where the tip of the brush is. Because I'm filming a tutorial, it's resulted in this happening, whereas on this side it hasn't, because I've been able to do this. But that is a perfect example of brush placement on the face. I also do like to use my pinky finger to stabilize my brush so that I'm not going in with a wobbly, unsteady hand. So I just place it down on my face, and that gives me extra control of my brush. Next, on a Morphe M506 brush, I'm going to take the shade On the Dot. So I picked up some of that shade on my brush, and this is where we're going to start blending that deeper eyeshadow out. So I'm actually going to place this eyeshadow pretty much on top of the very edge of that darker shade. If I was to place this directly above, there would be a pretty large disconnect between the dark blue and this new lighter blue we're putting on. So by placing this half on the previous shade, we're going to help make sure the blend is really seamless and the colors are going to fuse nicely together. Now I'm not overloading my brush, and I'm just picking up little amounts of eyeshadow at a time. But for this technique, I'm using little teeny tiny circular motions and little back and forward motions to blow the color out towards the edge. You can apply a little bit more pressure if you want to push that blend out, but I would recommend starting a bit more lighter handed than you think, because you can always go back in and add more eyeshadow. So I'm just going to work my way around the edge of this dark blue, swapping between little circular motions and window wiper motions. When you get here to the outer edge, you want to just use the very tip of the brush, and I recommend doing little flicking motions in the direction that you want your eyeshadow to go. This will just help keep the edge nice and soft and taper that color out nicely. On a Morphe M573 brush, I'm going to take the shade Best Version. So you've probably noticed now that the lighter the shade I use, the bigger the brush is getting, and the reason for that is because those smaller, denser brushes that I used with the darker shades are going to control the placement a lot better than this. But because we're now focusing on blending these colors up and out, this fluffy brush is going to help diffuse the edges so that we can get a nice soft blend as our transition shade. And the transition shade is the shade that you pretty much want to blend into your eye base. So now I'm taking that shade and I'm using a really light pressure and some small window wiper motions mixed with those circular motions And I'm just going to start blending the very edge of this eye look. I'm dipping back into the eyeshadow fairly frequently because I want to keep this nice and soft. And you'll start to see the edge of that blue is now being smoked out with this teal shade. My hand is pretty much holding the very edge of the brush here, and that light hand is really going to help just blend those colors out beautifully. And same thing on that outer edge, I'm just taking the very edge of the brush with a light hand and flicking that up and out. So we've blended our eyeshadow, and you might be thinking, Alex, this side looks a lot better than this side. And I would say that you are absolutely right, and here's how we're going to make both sides look the same. So a really important step in eyeshadow blending is going back and forth between all of your colors to blend seamlessly. On this side here, I've actually gone back with my darkest, lightest, and middle shades and repacked those colors on and blended them into each other again. I have gone back and forth multiple times so that the colors have a really nice gradient and you get the full pigment of the shades. So we're going to do that on this side now. I'm going back in with my darkest shade on the exact same brush, and I'm going to basically just re-intensify where we initially placed that color. Because we do have the shades down, you can put a little bit more product on, and you can have a little bit more pressure. I'm still keeping it relatively light-handed though, just so I can still keep control of the colors. But I am basically just going right over where that dark blue was and then feathering it out using the edge of the brush. And now I'm going back in with my medium blue shade and using the same technique to feather the edge of that dark blue shade and blend it out. And lastly, I'm going to pick up some more of that teal shade on the same brush and just feather everything together. You may find that you have to repeat this process a couple times. That's completely normal. I will often go back 2, 3, or even 4 times until I am satisfied with the blend. And now one more time, I'm going to go the opposite way. I'm going to go in with my medium blue and blend that back up into the teal. I'm using very light pressure because I just want to soften the edges together, and this isn't about depositing more color. And then I'm going to go back in with that dark blue shade one more time and just really deepen and diffuse that shade. And you'll notice I'm taking a mixture of my circular motions and window wiper sweeping motions. Both of these techniques just help to blend colors out nicely. So I'm happy with my blend. I'm actually going to go off camera and do a cut crease. Cut creases are an entirely different skill in itself to learn, so I will leave a card up here to the video if you are interested in learning how to do a full cut crease. So I'm going to do that off camera and then I will be back. For the base, I went in with this cosmetic paint from P. Louise. I actually hate these. Like, I don't know what they did, but the formula is so terrible. So ignore the fact that it looks incredibly crusty because the old formula was not like this at all. On a Sigma E65 brush, I'm picking up the shade Splash of Sass, and I'm going to use that shade to create a wing. First, I'm going to create one actually off to the side, and I'm just using the brush to stamp that product on, and then I'm also going to connect it back up to itself. So I'm just going to follow the original line to the top and I'm going to connect it up. I'm picking up on the dot on that same brush and I'm going to use my finger to flatten the edge and just lightly blend that dark blue out. I'm also going to do the same on this dark blue line as well. For detail looks, flattening the brush allows me to get really precise control and blend out small areas. This look is quite advanced, but I did want to show you how you can blend out small details if you don't have tiny brushes. I'm picking up the shade Best Version on that same brush, and I'm just doing the same thing. I'm flattening that brush and just using it to lightly blend out those wings. On my finger, I'm going to pick up the shade Drizzle Dreams, and I'm just going to start lightly tapping that over the lid. I'm not bringing it all the way up to the top, just over the lid. On a Morphe M213 brush, I'm just taking a white eyeshadow and I'm just using that to set right above where that shimmer shade is. On an Inglot 9S brush, I'm taking the shade Drip Drop. And I'm going to use this to set the inner corner. So this is a flat packing brush, so I'm literally just going to pack the colour on by stamping that brush down. So you've completed your eyeshadow blend, but you may notice you have a lot of product sitting under the eyes. This is exactly why I like to do my eyes first, because when you are working with bright colors, you get a lot of product fallout. To get rid of this, I'm going to simply take a cotton pad with some makeup remover, and I'm just going to go underneath my eye and remove any excess eyeshadow that doesn't need to be there. Now, some people like to finish the eyes in entirety, mascara, lashes, bottom lash line, but I actually like to do my base makeup first and then come back to the eyes. I find that if I was to do my mascara or put a lash on and then use any powders on my face, it's going to collect in the lashes and dull the whole look. So to avoid this, I'm going to go and do my base off camera and then I will finish off the eyes. Alright, I have done my base makeup. Let's finish off this eye look. I'm picking up the shade Splash of Sass on that Sigma E42 brush, and I'm going to blend this shade under my lower lash line. I'm going to do that trick where I actually flatten the brush, and this is going to help me pack that colour right up next to those lashes. Next, on that Morphe M506, I'm going back in with the shade On the Dot, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to flatten that brush and use it to blend that dark blue shade out. Then on that Morphe M573, I'm going to take the shade Best Version, and once again flattening that edge, I'm going to use that to smoke all those shades out. On a Sigma E36 brush, I'm going to take the shade Drip Drop, and I'm going in to connect our inner corner up to our lash line colours. I'm just going in with a light hand and just tapping that shade underneath. To finish off the eyes, I'm just going to pop some mascara and lashes on. Here's the eye look complete with lashes. And here's the final full face glam. You, my friend, have just learned how to blend eyeshadow like a pro. One final piece of advice I have is that don't be afraid to try something new. I was super intimidated to try new things, and that stopped me from growing my skills. I'm not gonna lie, the first few times you try something, it may not come out perfect, but that is part of the process. Practice really does make perfect, and the only way that you will develop these skills is by giving them a go. It took me almost a decade to learn these skills, so if you found the video helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. If you have a question that I have not answered, leave it in the comments and I'll be sure to help you out. If you recreate this look, be sure to tag me on Instagram. I would love to see. And if you want me to break down any more makeup techniques, let me know which ones you'd like to see next. So I'm going to finish the video off here. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't yet already. And if you want to see any other looks that I don't create here, check out my Instagram at MakeItWithAlex. All of my social medias are linked down below. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!